Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Welcome. Access to Democracy returns. I'm your host, Alan Miller, and we have a guest, very interesting individual, professor at Inver Hills Community College, Vicky Knickerbocker, who is a passionate social advocate. Let's talk about a little background. Where did you grow up and where did you go to school?
Alan, I grew up in Cloquet, Minnesota. And I went to school in Cloquet High School, and then I went to the University of Minnesota Duluth to get a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and sociology. And then I got a master's degree in social work at the University of Minnesota, the Twin Cities campus. And I started out as a social worker in a rural county in Aiken, Minnesota, and I worked there as a social worker type person for over 16 years. And during that time I got my master's, and so then I began my journey of community college teaching, which I have done for the last 20 plus years.
And you've been in the MNSCU system all that time.
Yeah, I started in MNSCU. I think the greatest gift I ever got for employment occurred a few days before Christmas in 1991, and I got a phone call from a man named Kelly McCullough at Central Lakes College, and he said, "How would you like to teach a course for us?" And at that time, the course he offered for me to teach was a women's studies course, and I said, "Kelly, you have just given me the best Christmas present I could ever have had." So,
and you've been in the system ever since. Now
yes.
You are at Inver Hills, and you've been there for quite a while. You teach a variety of courses there.
Yeah, I teach, the courses I teach are human service courses, humanities courses, and sociology courses. The theme of all those courses, as you've previously mentioned, is social justice and human rights.
And I know from my own experience that you are a very popular instructor with the students, and not only on campus, not only around here, but also you take them on numerous trips, sometimes overseas, sometimes really locally, but I know you go to the Holocaust Museum at least once a year in Washington, D.C. with a group of students, and tell us a little bit about how that evolved.
Well, I think the best way to learn is to experience something firsthand. So when I began to teach the Holocaust course actually in Central Lakes College in Brainerd, and before the new century emerged, I had won a MNSCU grant to take students on a field trip from Brainerd to Minneapolis to Washington, D.C., which is sponsored by the Jewish Community Relations Council. And that particular privilege launched me into the idea of continuing to do it on a permanent basis. And when I began to teach at Inver Hills in 2007, I said I was going to develop a course on the Holocaust, and we were going to also take the students on the trip. And so since about, roughly speaking, 2008, a course at the college at Inver Hills has existed, a 3-credit course in Humanities, which is called Holocaust Through Multiple Lenses, that allows students who choose to go on a one-day field trip to the Holocaust Museum as part of a package. What that means is that they're on a charter flight with about 150 other college and high school students from throughout the state. And despite the fact the trip is only one day and students leave very early in the morning, they have consistently over the years signed up for it, because my students range in age from 17 to 72 plus, and they said it's a great getaway for them, and they're flocking to the class for taking the course. They're very interested in studying the Holocaust or human rights in general, and going on a trip without their children for one day is a welcome relief for many of my non-traditional students.
Now, one of the things that strikes me, having taught some Holocaust and genocide courses, is the lack of knowledge of today's students in terms of, say, the Holocaust itself. They know that there was a World War II, and they know that Hitler slaughtered a lot of people, but they don't really know about it. Do you find that, and how do you confront it?
I think that there are some students who know a little, some students who think they know a lot, and some who frankly admit they don't know anything. If they know anything about genocide at all, or the numerous genocides that have occurred in the 20th century, the Holocaust is one of them. But I find that as they get into the class and their knowledge gets bigger and more richer, they say there's so much more to learn. So I often confirm that by telling them that although I've been studying the Holocaust and other genocides since about 1999, so almost over 15 years, that every day I find something new to learn. So yeah, some of my students come in very naive, some come in knowing more, and some come thinking they're experts, but by the time they leave my class, they know they're not experts, but they know a lot more.
And that brings up something else to me, which is I think it's wonderful that we have all this emphasis on intelligent technology and the IT courses and things like that. But in my experience, students are not getting grounded in sociology, in the humanities, in the lower levels, in high school or even below high school. And I think that that's a very detrimental, really, aspect of education that is robbing them of something that's very important, not technology-wise, but really internally.
Yeah, I think students should learn to think not only with their heads, but with their hearts. And I think a lot of things that are missing in their education might be character development or critical thinking about life choices or knowledge about human rights events that have occurred in the world. And so I think that in order for them to make better choices in the future, they have to be more grounded in history and historical events that have threatened mankind. So I think by taking my course or courses like that, they get a broader sense of what has happened in the past or what could still occur in the future, because people...
Or which is occurring right now.
Yeah. They're very surprised by
all over the world.
Many of them to learn that Darfur, which is the genocide occurring in Africa, has many historical parallels to the Holocaust or any of the 20th century genocides that have been...
1994, Rwanda,
yeah.
Really, and particularly, it's 20 years ago. The average 20 or 21-year-old student is not at all conversant with it. You show them, at least I did in my class, as you know, Hotel Rwanda, and it brings tears to the eyes of many students, and something that they just were not aware of.
Yeah. I think that many of our students have a desire to know more about the world, but the information they get from the internet or even from television news at 6 o'clock or the local newspaper seldom addresses the critical issues. Why is the genocide in Darfur occurring? Why did the genocide in Rwanda occur? So many years after the Holocaust. It's only, Rwanda happened about 50 years after the Holocaust ended.
That's right,
And,
20 years ago.
Yeah. And now Darfur has been going on for some time, less than, let's say, 25 years after the Rwandan genocide occurred.
Well, you said one thing that perked my ears up. You said newspapers. In my experience, the students rarely read the newspapers. I have asked students over the years, how many of you read a newspaper, at least a newspaper a day? The New York Times, they don't read the New York Times, but they don't even read the Pioneer Press or the Star Tribune, and they're missing so much by that. And it's not emphasized in grammar school, it's not emphasized in high school, but it's so important to grounding them into the world about them, and it seems to be just escaping as everybody goes to their iPhone and their iPad and they're this and they're that and they're all on Facebook and they're all on Twitter. But I find that that's a great way of communication. It's also a great area of miscommunication.
Yeah, I would say that I think why the class is so popular also, I had to find a creative strategy as an educator to hook the students. And so what I did is I actually wanted to offer this course about the Holocaust, and I could have offered it as a special topics course in sociology, but that might not have appealed to so many students. So almost every student in the Minsky system has to have a 3-credit class in humanities. And so I thought it was important to appeal to a larger audience, and I think the way that I chose to do that was to design a course that had some humanities focus to it, so the students would be appealed to taking it based on its content and based on its discipline location. So it's offered at Inver as a 3-credit course in humanities. It's called Holocaust Through Multiple Lenses, and we look at literature, and we look at art, and we look at music, and we look at film, and I think because of that, the students are drawn. And we teach students in this course how to determine if the historical representations of the Holocaust are accurate, and what the Holocaust means to us today, what are its social, political, legal, and economic, educational implications for the future.
I know you've had experience both in classroom teaching and online teaching. Tell us about that. Which one you find effective, or do you find them both effective?
Alan, I would say that I've chosen just because I wanted to make certain that the Holocaust course could be provided to a broader audience. In the fall, I teach it strictly online. And the students who take it online seem to be of two types. They're very eager and very tech savvy, and it's not a problem for them. But others, I think, still need more direction and guidance, and they have struggled online a bit more. Because people who take classes online have to be pretty self-disciplined, and they don't get that teacher-student interaction that they need. So, however, I enjoy it very much.
Is it interactive online, or is it not?
It's interactive in the sense that they participate in discussion forums, but they don't get to see each other, and there's no visual contact.
It doesn't bring them together once or twice during the semester for
not
forums or something like that?
No, but I have found this summer I'm teaching a course that is a hybrid course. So it's a mixed blended, and I think that's much better. But I think myself personally, I still enjoy the old-fashioned delivery of classes. I love to be in the classroom. And even though the course I teach about the Holocaust in the spring is offered on Saturdays from 9 to noon, we have a packed house. And the majority of students who took it spring semester were over the age of 30 plus. So I think there's a wide range of people, some who are full-time students, some who are part-time students, and some who are community members who simply want to come to learn more, and they must be overly committed, because most of the students I know in the past, have known in the past, didn't prefer to come to class.
Especially on a Saturday.
Yeah.
Especially for a morning class.
Yeah. So, and by the time I got them, usually there were so many afterwards, Alan, that wanted to talk about this or that. It was unusual that I got out of there by 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Differentiate between sociology and humanities.
Sociology is a discipline, an academic discipline that looks at, how do people interact in different social settings. It looks at the social inequalities, and it also looks at human rights. But humanities has more of a focus on films and literature and music and other types of dramatic representations, or even looks at the museums. How are the museums constructed? So it's imperative that we go to see the museum. So I would say the greater portion of all the students that have taken the class in the spring, that's the time when the trip is offered, the JCRC, the Jewish Community Relations Council, offers the trip, have gotten to see how Holocaust representation on a national level is done. And they feel honored. I mean, many
of course, the Holocaust Museum in Washington is such an imposing place. Depressing, yes. Educational, yes, but imposing. And it's laid out so uniquely that I can see where, it would really stop them cold. And they have to be dedicated. They have to get up and be on a plane at 6 o'clock in the morning and know that they're not going to be back until midnight or later.
Yeah.
So.
And they have the opportunity, I think, while they're in our nation's capital, not only to see the Holocaust Museum, but I give them some free time because I think it's important that they take in other historical sites. Maybe the Martin Luther King newly constructed memorial. Maybe they walk down to Arlington Cemetery and see the Vietnam Memorial. They see the Lincoln Memorial. And some of them are really eager beavers, and they go all the way to the Capitol. And I would say that one of our highlights in the past was to visit Betty McCollum and sit with her on the steps in Washington, D.C.
Our congressman from the 4th.
Yep. She met my students and welcomed them to Washington, D.C., and the students had their photo taken with her that year. They were pretty impressed.
Now, I know that you do a lot of traveling to historical places, really to enhance your knowledge of the things that you're teaching about. And I know, for instance, you recently went to Peru, where you saw Machu Picchu. Tell us about that.
Alan, since I've been about 40, I've had the opportunity at least once a year to visit something.
You're more than 40?
Oh, how about 58? Yeah, I said that I've dedicated my summers, since I've been about 40, to expanding my knowledge of the world and the people who live in it, and by visiting historical sites that have some human rights issue associated with them.
So let's start in Peru.
In Peru, I not only went to Peru on sabbatical in 2013, but I also went to Ecuador before I went to Peru. And I was planning to take a tour in Ecuador to learn more about Chevron's oil spill and the hidden costs of oil. I wasn't able to complete all of it because the tour sponsored by Global Exchange was canceled. But I did arrange to have one of their tour guides visit with me and take me some places around, and made it possible for me to visit with a man that's featured on one of the films that has been produced about the hidden costs of oil. And my sister-in-law is from a very little tiny town, a village in very rural Peru. And so while I visited there, I got to see how rural it actually was, because I'd never been there previously. And the fact that the children in that little town wear uniforms to school really impressed me. And despite their poor status or their impoverished status, they took great pride in going to school. I learned how people cope and live in dire situations. Most of those people did not have running water, did not have access to electricity. but they were very friendly and very open and very honest and very authentic. And they invited me to come to their school and teach them a little bit about English. So I found myself in 2 6th-grade classrooms and, teaching them the alphabet and the numbers and a few common greetings, and it was really quite an experience for me.
That was sort of a bonus to that trip. Now, you also went recently to Cambodia, I understand.
Yeah, during my sabbatical in 2012 and 2013 in December, I was able to go on a very special journey with some people from St. Cloud State. Their multicultural office once a year sponsors a trip, which historically has been taken by the Hmong students to go back to Malaysia, to Laos, to Thailand, to Laos, to Cambodia, and to Malaysia. And so on that journey, we were able to go, 4 of us, to Phnom Penh. I had wanted to go there for a long time, because during the Cambodian genocide, Phnom Penh, the city of Phnom Penh, was evacuated, and Pol Pot started a reign of terror called Ground Zero, and forced people out of their urban enclaves to rural settings, and masterminded a genocide of his own, which lasted for 4 years. And in the city of Phnom Penh, they turned schools into killing centers and torture centers. So one of the special visits we made was to one of those. But on the other hand, I want to celebrate the fact that when I was in Cambodia, I got to see Angkor Wat, and which is one of the 7 wonders of the world.
Yeah.
And so, as you mentioned earlier, I had also got that same year to go to Peru, to Machu Picchu, and see another wonder of the world.
Well, you've traveled to the Middle East, I know. You've traveled to Europe. You've traveled to South America, as we mentioned. So you really have spent a lot of time traveling to these places. That certainly has to enhance your teaching.
Yeah. I would say that in some of the traveling, I've also got to attend special schools or special seminars. For instance, when I went to Jerusalem for the first time, I was able to attend a month-long seminar in Jerusalem, which is designed for Holocaust educators. And during that visit, I was able to meet Holocaust educators from around the world. My roommate was from Poland, and there were educators from Europe and Australia and Canada and the United States, and we got to be a cadre of teachers. So I would say that I've traveled. I've been to Israel 4 different times to attend seminars or to attend conferences to further my knowledge of how to teach, and to have been able to go places. I've also been not only in Jerusalem, but we went over snuck over to Palestine. And we actually went to Bethlehem. So on that trip, one of my most unique historical sites to visit was the Church of Nativity. So I actually got to see where it is alleged that Jesus Christ was born. And so I love to travel, and I like to travel to places where other people say it's too dangerous, because usually if it's too dangerous, that means something's going on that shouldn't be happening there.
Looking at our educational system, in particular our higher educational system, what would you say we could do to improve the education for our students? As you look around the Minsky system, which you know intimately, or something like that, how can we make college better for our students?
I think a couple things could happen. I think students should have more experiential learning activity and service learning opportunities to enhance their academic work. So, for instance, the trip that we mentioned to the Holocaust Museum is one way to do that, but in addition to taking them to Washington, D.C., I think if you're studying something like the Holocaust and you're learning about people of different cultures, and particularly the Jewish culture, one of the ways you could foster students' knowledge also, besides book learning and watching films, is to take them to Temple Israel or any of the Jewish synagogues, And most of the Jewish synagogues in this area are open to the students attending a service, or at least coming and having some kind of lecturette or consultation with someone there who can tell them something about what it means to be a Jew in the 20th century, and
You
how
could probably expand that to our Hmong community and to our Somali community and to our Asian population and each of those. And
yeah. I was thinking one of the things we're going to do, I'm also teaching a sociology course this summer, and on the last day of that course, which will occur on the last day of that class, I have planned what I call the ethnic food tour. And we are going to go to visit 6 ethnic food markets, and we're going to be gone from 9 o'clock in the morning to about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And the students are quite excited because our plans are to visit a Hispanic food market, a few Hmong food markets, and there's 3 Somali students in the class, and they're going to acquaint us with some Somali markets. Actually, the ethnic food tour was planned a week before, and one of the students who is Somali and Muslim came to me and said, we have holidays on the 23rd, and our holidays will be over by the 30th, and the Somali markets will be opened. So could we change it? And I asked the students, the rest of the students, what they thought, and to include their classmates. They said they would be willing to have that ethnic food market tour.
now you said there were 2 things. What's the other thing that you would do to improve?
The other thing is service learning. So I think that students who are in classes should have greater opportunities to participate in service learning experiences. So, for example, we could go back to the Holocaust course. Last spring, I was approached by our service learning coordinator. Her name is Katie at the college, and she said, Vicky, I have a unique proposition for you. I want you to think about having your students prepare class lessons for middle school students about the Holocaust. And I thought,
That's a very interesting concept.
Yeah. So then I talked to the 7th grade teacher, and I said, what do you really want my students to do? He said, I would like them to put together 3 mini lessons that would teach my students 3 things about the Holocaust. What it was, why it happened, and how it happened. And I want you to have them to come in for 75 minutes and create 3 stations where they would learn, basically create 3 different types of presentations.
And you did that, and it was
yes,
successful.
It was so successful, Alan. The students took the initiative. I didn't plan those lessons, but they had to plan lessons that were age appropriate. So they dressed up in costumes. They found all kinds of simple ways to impart that information to those 7th graders.
And we're going to have to thank you at this point because our time is up. We've been talking with Professor Vicky Knickerbocker, who's presently at Inver Hills, and really fascinating in an area that we don't get to talk about too often. Vicky, thanks so much.